و لیون و مارسی و بوردو با تمام قوا کوشیدند جنبش زنان ایرانی را معرفی کنند. ما شورش و جشن، قهر و پیروزی زنان ایرانی را روز به روز منعکس کردیم. ما اعضای جنبش رهایی زن در فرانسه اعلام می‌کنیم که وقتی زنان ایرانی پا به میدان مبارزه می‌گذارند به معنی پیشروی زنان سراسر دنیاست.
Hello back. We've just discussed the International Women's Day in 2010, and we have talked about the news of in Iran about or for International Women's Day and what the Worker Communist Party of Iran is planning for International Women's Day over the weekend, 6th, 7th and 8th of March. Now, what we have just seen is a clip from 1979, actually, Women's March, International Women's Day in Iran. And what we have seen, there were like thousands, 10,000 of women marching. And what were the demands of women back then?
I think it was specifically about compulsory whaling. I vividly remember that day. It was just after the uprising in February 1979 uprising. The Islamic regime, the newly sort of formed group of people who were men in power, so they started saying, look, actually women should be covering themselves. So imposed formally compulsory whaling. So before that, you know, people's dress was optional, whatever. if anything at all, it was optional. And then with the Islamic regime, they actually said it's compulsory whaling. And on that day, thousands of women and men marched on the streets of Tehran and many other cities. And the slogan was neither oppression nor whale, a sort of literal translation of slogan on that day. And it was just an amazing scene, and you could see that actually many organizations from international organizations had come to Iran at that time, because the atmosphere was such a amazing sort of environment in those early days. It was just freedom to express yourself was amazing, despite the fact that the Islamic groups were trying to limit that, and that's why actually they came to power, to destroy those gains of revolution in 1979. And that's, you know, that was a slogan, and that was the first strike of the political Islamic movement against the revolution in Iran, and it targeted specifically women because it knew that by enslaving women in Iran, they would be in a much powerful position to control the mass movements of millions of people who'd come out against the Shah's regime and for liberation and a better life. And that's what they did. And from then on, from March the 8th, 1979, you know, step by step, the Islamic regime tried to actually take away the rights of people in different stages. They started to impose Sharia law at various levels, stoning, controlling sexual relations and how people behave. In the month of Ramadan and Ashura, they started to actually control what people eat, how they eat, what time, and force people to actually go to pray. You name it, they started to change all the educational sort of materials in the school, in universities. There was Islamic Cultural Revolution. And many people now who actually, like Abdul Karim Soroush, who actually now started to criticize the Islamic regime like rats jumping off the sinking ship. Those days are architects of misogyny and sexual apartheid. And actually by doing that, that was actually forced not only the women in Iran, but also the whole of society, took away people's rights and pushed back or pulled back Iranian society for many decades and turned it into a total darkness, effectively. But while they imposed the harshest environment on Iranian society, at the same time, parallel to that, you've seen 31 years of resistance and struggle. And actually, when you look at the 31 years of history of revolutionary movement in opposition to Islamic regime, there is an amazing sort of wealth of experience there, and that's where, you know, the current new generation of women in Iran take their strength, and they haven't lost that experience. So it's a generation of undefeated, you know, people, revolutionaries, women activists still alive. Remember those days of 1979, and what does that mean? And the ability of people to change life, and they haven't given up hope, and I think they're beacon internationally, and that's where they are.
So now, 31 years later, we have the Manifesto of the Liberation of Women, written by 4 prominent women rights activists, who are all currently actually not in Iran because they had to flee Iran. And now the first sentence of this Manifesto of Liberation, which was written in January this year in 2010, so 31 years after, the first sentence is actually, the very existence of the Islamic regime of Iran is incompatible with freedom of women. So this is a very clear statement, isn't it?
Absolutely. Islamic regime and political Islamic movement, specifically in its core and essence, is inhuman and anti-woman. Immediately, as soon as you have anywhere that you have political Islamic movement gaining grounds or in power, your rights of women is immediately taken away. Compulsory veiling is imposed. You know, a woman's sort of testimony in court is half of a man. Rather, they lose the right to divorce and custody. You know, the right to resist domestic violence. You name it, all of those. Anyway, you'll see in Iran, in Iraq, in Palestine, in European countries, you'll see that. Anyway, you'll see that. You know, as soon as they have a bit of ground, they impose those, and they justify in different ways. So that's the first sentence. I think is very right. As you said, this manifesto was written in early January this year, and it was written by 4 prominent women activists who actually were involved in 1979. Some of them young, some of them were seasoned activists then, and some of them were actually just beginning to become political activists, and they were first generation of a revolution. And 4 of those, actually after 31 years, they've actually written that in a new environment of 2010, where the whole of society is actually stood up and said enough is enough to the Islamic regime, and they've said that the society, Iranian society, repels Islam and Islamization of the society and Islamic regime. And actually they've written this manifesto to capture the essence of today, and also the fact, and bring that experience of 31 years of a struggle against the Islamic regime. And I think if you actually look at the demands, they've got a bit of analysis of the current situation, and they've got the issues around the fact that the violence in Iran it's been imposed, and the Islamic regime has been responsible. So these people need to put on trial. All the abolition of all misogynist laws, separation of state from religion, and end to sexual apartheid, and actually, you know, the right, you know, and separation of secularism and separation of religion from the state. There's fundamental issues, I think, that are written in this, as interesting to read, and I suggest that viewers would go to WPI blog and have a look at this and read it, and come back to us. We'll have a discussion.
Okay, thank you. We will be back after the break.